Back when I lived in the state of Maine, I would annually run a race that was called the Beach to Beacon. It was called that because you would start at a beach and you would end at a lighthouse. It was a 10K run that was about as New England as it gets, right? Right along the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, ending at a lighthouse. You could see it right over the horizon as you were coming to an end. I don't particularly like running, but I do like accomplishing things. I can run a 5K without much problem, but a 10K is work, and I don't particularly like that. I don't know if any of you are runners, but man, just about the fourth or fifth mile, I feel like I'm going to die, and I don't know how to overcome that except run more, but I don't like running. So what are you going to do, right? So I'm running this Beach to Beacon one year, and normally I listen to podcasts as I run. My theory being that if I'm listening to something that makes me think, I'm thinking about that and not the fact that I want to die. And so that usually works pretty well for me, but because I was running along the ocean, there wasn't really good signal, and so I hadn't downloaded any podcasts. I usually stream them, and so I thought I was in trouble. What am I going to do during this run? And I thought, well, I've got some access to some music. So I started playing music, and on comes this song by Green Day that I know really well, and it started like this. You may catch on to the lyrics. It says, "I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me, and I walk alone. Down, 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 down. I walk this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams, where the city sleeps, and I'm the only one, and I walk alone. I walk alone, I walk alone. My shadow's the only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone out there will find me. Till then, I walk alone." Now, at about the 4-mile mark, when I was feeling terrible, this motivated me. It's just me. I walk alone. I got to do this myself. And I thought, all right, here I go. And it pushed me on. But as I was telling this story to a friend who suffers from depression, he told me, I can't listen to that song. I can't listen to that song, period. That song comes on, I have an episode, without question. And I thought, whoa, that's crazy. And I went back and I realized that a song like this really is kind of a depressing song. It's sad. How many people identify with that song because they hear, my shadow's the only thing that walks beside me, and they feel a pervasive sense of loneliness and alone. And you begin to realize that a lot of art really spends time teasing out the idea of aloneness and depression and who we are when it's just us. The idea of belonging, or a sense of belonging that we may or may not have, is critically important to us today. And belonging as an entity or idea is at an all-time low. People are struggling to belong. And the idea of belonging is so pervasively important to who we are. But our metaphors for belonging in our society today, in many ways, are lacking. In order to belong to most anything, you have to be something first, or have something to contribute. The ways and places we belong, I started thinking about what are times we use the word belong. Well, we belong to a political party. You are your vote. You can belong to a country club if you can pony up for it. You can belong to a team if you have enough skills. You can belong to a school. You can be alumni if you have succeeded and graduated. You can belong to a family, which for many of us is a great metaphor, but for many of us is a tragic metaphor we'd rather not speak of. You can belong to a Jelly of the Month club. That's the gift that keeps on giving the whole year. You can belong to a gym. Many of us do all January long. You only go that first week, but you pay all month. You can belong to a book club. You can belong to Girls or Boy Scouts, on and on and on. But most of these things you get into by some some bit of merit or an act of God or a strike of luck or some sort of initiation. Belonging is difficult. And in order to feel like you belong is even more difficult. Many of us are card-carrying members to things that make us feel isolated or lonely, not as if we're welcome to be a part of the nitty-gritty. But belonging is vitally important for how it is we view and understand ourselves. And currently today, belonging is at an all-time low and isolation is at epidemic levels in our American society. I'm going to share a whole series of statistics with you right now that are going to show us how much we are struggling with a sense of belonging and how much isolation is on the rise. So, for example, the American lifespan should be on the rise, right? The two biggest killers of people in America today, and they're miles ahead of everything else, are cancer and heart disease. Both of them are causes of 25% of deaths in America. So combined, half of all deaths are heart disease or cancer related, okay? Half of all deaths are heart disease or cancer related. Medical science is doing an incredible job of helping in those two areas. So deaths in terms of heart disease and cancer, while they still are the two biggest killers in society, are both on the decline, okay? That's really good news. Car accidents are on the decline. Stroke, the third biggest killer, is on the decline. We should be living longer than anyone in human history ever have. But for 3 consecutive years in American society, average life expectancy has declined. It should be on the upswing. It should be 82 years. Then you expect to live 83 years. Then you expect to live 84 years. But for the first time in the last 100 years, save a flu outbreak in 62, 63, for the first time in the last 100 years, life expectancy has been on the decline in America. And it's been so 3 straight years. 2016 was smaller than 2015. 2017 was smaller than 2016. 2018 was smaller than 2017. And 2019 is on pace to make it 4 consecutive years. That life expectancy is on the decline. Now, you should ask yourself at this moment, how is it that we're defeating the things that kill us and our life expectancy is on the decline? How in the world is that even possible? The answer is this: suicide and opioid addiction. This year, 45,000 Americans will take their own lives. 70,000 will die from self-inflicted drug overdoses. 45,000 will take their own lives and 70,000 will die from drug overdoses. We are killing ourselves at unprecedented levels. And when social scientists go to figure out why in the world this is happening, what is going on to create this, they're finding loneliness is the cause that is rising to the top. For example, 13% of Americans say that no one, not one person, 0, know them well. Most Americans claim to have either 0 or 1 friend when they're asked. Loneliness is an epidemic. So why are we lonely? Where does that come from? Is that your fault? Like, make friends, come on, right? That's not necessarily the issue. The traditional ways in which we have belonged are evaporating. Our society is changing and we're not filling it with new avenues. For example, here's just a really neutral idea, okay? In the 1950s, 70% of American television sets tuned into I Love Lucy when it came on the television. Decius? 70% tuned into I Love Lucy. Today, 93% of Americans have access to more than 500 channels on their television. So the highest rated cable TV show, which is Hannity, gets about 1% of the US population to tune into it. So, where it is that we're getting our information, our entertainment is fragmented and segmented. So when you go to work tomorrow, everyone may say they turned on the TV, but 60 years ago, everyone turned it on to Lucy and they talked about that gag that Ricky did. But now there's no shared thing that we all can count on that we've experienced together. So when you go to the office and you've got 8 people in your room, all 8 of you did 8 different things last night. There's no ability at work to connect with each other about what we've done since we saw each other yesterday. We struggle to have shared narratives and stories in our lives. Now, if you assume that's a problem, let's talk about work in another way. If you would have begun working in 1970, you graduated high school, you graduated college, and you entered into a firm as a first-year employee, you would have expected that on average, you would have spent 26.4 years working for that firm. That would have given you things like brand loyalty. That would have given you an idea of putting some of your self-worth and value in your work, in your company. Oftentimes, these companies were ubiquitous in towns. Everyone worked for this company that gives jobs to the people in the place that I lived. And you would have expected that you would have put in 26.4 years to that firm in which you worked. Now, if you were to graduate high school or college today and go to work, you would expect on average that you would put in 4.2 years of work into that firm before you moved on. Technology is causing this. Automation of jobs, ease of understanding who's hiring, an ability to get from place to place on your way up the ladder. There's nothing wrong with these things, and they're creating an untold amount of wealth in our society. People have access to wealth and class changing like they have never before. There's good things to this. So I'm not saying everything that I'm saying is bad, but when you go from being able to work at the same place for 26.2 years, what you have there is not only a sense of loyalty on your own end, but people that you know that you're going to put decades in. If you worked on an assembly line, you showed up next to the same dude every day and got to know them whether you wanted to or not. If you worked in an office and you expected to put 26.2 years in, you got to know your office mates in meetings and works, and you had to get to know them because you're going to be spending 1/3 of your life looking at them. At 4.2 years, we barely scratch the surface with each other, and we begin to get a sense that people don't know who we are. This is creating problems on the back end, specifically for men in our society today. Men in particular are struggling with loneliness, and part of it is our inability to build relationships. Stats say that men don't make new good relationships after they're 25 years old. So if they're moving from job to job, their ability and attention span to making new friends erodes, whereas women maintain that ability to make new friendships through their whole lives. Like, for example, think of this statistic. Over 60% of 65-year-old men say that their wife is their best friend. Over 60% of men, any of you dudes in here about 65? About 65? Okay. So you see a couple people, right? On average, folks that look like them, over 60% of them say that their wife is their best friend, which neutrally is fine. That's good. But only 20% of 65-year-old women say the same thing about their husband. Okay? Now that statistic, rightfully, you have laughed at that. That's hysterical. That is hysterical. But at the same time, men are placing untold burdens on their wives, right? They are to be their lover, their spouse, their household manager, and their best friend on top of it, whereas women are outsourcing that work. Right? This is problematic. The inequality in that statistic is problematic for our relationships with each other. right? It either ought to be 100, or 0, 0. And frankly, if we're honest, like 0, 0 is probably what's best. We need friends. We need to have friends outside of our spouse should function as our spouse, and that should be like our best relationship, right? The person we do things with, the person we share life with, but we've got to have friends outside of that as well. And we're not able to do that in the culture that we've cultivated. And some of that is rooted back in these issues of work. We aren't stable in our desks, on our assembly lines. We aren't seeing the same people. And the transience is causing us to keep from connecting with other people at work. And so we go home, especially us men, and we project all of our relational needs onto our spouse. It's not received in the same way that it's given, and our men are becoming lonely. And this is one of the reasons they're finding that suicide and drug abuse and alcohol abuse is on the incline in men. This is all troubling and difficult statistics to wander through in our society. We are a people who do not belong, who are increasing in isolation, are feeling lonely, and we're acting out on that by abusing drugs, alcohol, and contemplating and executing suicide. Now, there are, of course, actual medical diseases that lead to depression, that lead to addiction issues, and I don't want to minimize those. But as we're watching this rise, we're watching that these diseases are rising as well. There's a reason people are struggling more. And I want to argue that it's because we don't belong and we feel excluded. Research shows that a single instance of exclusion, one time that you felt excluded, can undermine things like well-being, IQ test performance, which we think as such a static, removed issue. You are smart or you are not. And also self-control. A single instance of exclusion can undermine IQ, well-being, and self-control. Now, you start piling on more and more and more that people are feeling isolated. And look at what it is doing to us. And part of this issue is our technology as well, right? Within our pockets, we have cellular phones that are computers more powerful than what we use to land on the moon. And those things give us the ability to be anywhere we want to be but here. We can cultivate a life that's better than reality by taking pictures of our best moments and Instagramming out to the world that everything is good, by participating in video games that take us away from here and now, by chatting with people from across the world that seem and feel more exotic than the people who sit across from you at the dinner table. We can be anywhere and anyone we want to be on our phones, on the internet, in our technology. And so often we choose a different life than the ones that's right before us. And our inability and our struggle to be present where we are planted is creating a loneliness because our digital persona is what we think is real, and what is real is what we're trying to escape from. And we're lonely. And we're excluded, and we're struggling, and we're not willing to change. Belonging is in crisis in American society. Belonging is in crisis. But this isn't new. It's not made up. We're not the first people ever to struggle with the idea of belonging. What's my place? Who am I? What do I do? What's my role? We're not the first people to ever struggle with this. And there's a whole book of the Bible that's really, really written to address this issue. Maybe not on the epidemic or endemic scale that we're talking about here, but the book of 1 Corinthians really is an addressing of where people are at and how it all fits together, and how belonging and appreciating one another will help us in love overcome our questions of identity. So the issue in 1 Corinthians is this, is that Paul went to the city of Corinth. It was a pagan city with temples everywhere. It was a port city. It was rich and wealthy. And it was such an important place in the Roman Empire that Paul decided he was going to plant a church there. And so he went and spent a year and a half evangelizing, and then cultivating leaders and creating what he thought was a healthy church before he carried on in his missionary journey. And before long, people started visiting him. People started writing him letters and saying, hey, Paul, you remember that great church you planted in Corinth? Not so great anymore. Not going real well over here. People are mad at each other. You know, there's some people who like their small group leader and others who think their small group leader is smarter than theirs. People won't sit together at meals. Anytime we get together and we try and talk or worship together, there's those wackos over there speaking in tongues and others still who are interrupting the preacher to tell them they're wrong. Church is a mess. And so Paul kind of wrote one of those letters that sounds like, if you don't shape up, Daddy's going to come home and whoops them, you know. And so Paul writes 1 Corinthians very much in that tone, with a harsh, authoritative tone, saying, guys, whatever has happened there is out of whack. You have got to understand that the fabric of the work of the church is love. And that helps us appreciate one another rather than trying to tear each other down. It'll build us together instead of apart. And right now, there's a lot of apart happening. And so in chapter 12, which we're going to read in just a moment, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 to 26, he gives us one of my favorite metaphors in all of the New Testament. He talks about the idea of the body, like the body that we have, hands, feet, eyes, hair, toes. He talks about the body and how the body parts need each other. And that metaphor is a powerful metaphor that hopefully can help us today recall how it is that we should work to bringing ourselves together instead of driving ourselves apart. Again, we're going to read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 to 26. And I'd invite you to stand with me as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today. The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts. And though all of its parts are many, they form one body. So it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free. And we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. That eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable and treated with are treated with special modesty. Well, our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffer, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. I love this metaphor. I've loved reading this throughout my life and thinking to myself, what part of the body am I? I mean, really, I kind of wish that I were the brain or the heart, giving energy to everything, being the smart one in the room. But if you ask teachers that I've had or my mom who's in the room right now, they'd probably all say that I'm the mouth. Fair. Sometimes we aren't what we wish we could be, but It's very vitally important that we play the role that we are given. If there's anything Paul is arguing for here, it's that no matter if you are special and are great and wonderful, you shouldn't run around demanding attention because you get your attention in being special. But instead, those ones that are hands and feet, that do the visible things, that have special honor, they should give honor to those who have less honor. We're told here that those who are less honorable should be treated with special honor. So if you're wondering why Pastor Norm is given a microphone every single week, now you know why. But as we look at this, we see that belonging emerges out of the way a healthy church works together. We may not always be the best, most famous part, but yet we should use our fame and our power to honor those who have lesser parts. I'm amazed here that when he talks about the body, he talks about things like eyes and ears, famous parts of the body. But what really makes the body go is muscles, ligaments, and tendons. And a good church has very strong muscles, ligaments, and tendons. I've never seen one of my muscles before. I hope to never see them because that means there's a very large gash. But I know that they're there, and I work on keeping them healthy and strong because they keep me moving and going. Currently, I've been going to physical therapy because I have a bit of a shoulder impingement. And every time I try to throw, I feel the bone kind of tearing at the ligament. And Paul is right. That pain has kept the rest of my body, which is in great working order, from playing the sports that I love. And so I need to care for the one part that hurts so that the rest of me, which is well, can get back to playing like I want to play. But that's the way it is in the church as well. There are people here that are less famous than others, less well known. People know their name less, know less of their story. Paul here is saying those people aren't less important to the body of Crossroads than those who are known and have power and have wealth or whatever it is. We all matter. We all belong together. No matter who you are or where you come from, no matter how long you've been coming here, no matter what your history is, if this is your first week or you've been here for 20 plus years, you matter as much as the next person because it's not you who are important, but the one body of Christ that you are baptized into that matters. It is Christ that matters. And God is knitting us together in the church to make something beautiful out of us. We become one body when we bring our gifts, skills, histories, abilities, and even struggles together. When we bring all that together, it's when we begin to see that a body is being built out of that looks a lot like Christ. And how beautiful is that? And if you're missing, if you're not a part of that, how much worse off are we all? One of the things that concerns me about being pastor, is how technology is keeping us from showing up at church. We can utilize our ability to check out the sermon later. We could use our ability to follow along to worship music on the radio to say maybe we don't need church. But if you tease out what Paul is saying here, you never know that when you miss, what person may have needed you present on Sunday? What person you may have passed in the hallway and given an encouraging word to? What person who doesn't feel in their own heart that they're presentable, that you made feel special when you showed up and spent time with them? Our showing up matters because often we want to be any place but where we are planted. And in our desiring to live a better life as we want to define it, we will show up and go and do all sorts of things. And very rarely will we show up in our obligatory places and find that God works when we show up in worship. This to me is shown really well in one of my favorite movies. I love the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which every time I say that strikes me as ironic because I don't really love old movies all that much. But this movie I watch at least annually every December. And I love that movie with all my heart because George doesn't understand his own life. George was born thinking he was special, And in many ways he was, but he thought he was going to leverage that specialness into adventure after adventure. For him, the good life meant getting out of his hometown and experiencing the world. He wanted to travel. He wanted to make money. He wanted to be powerful, wealthy, famous. He wanted the people to be jealous of the life that he lived. But circumstance after circumstance kept capturing him and keeping him in his hometown of Bedford Falls. His brother ends up being a famous pilot in World War II. One of his buddies from school ends up owning a plastics factory and making a lot of money. And George can't help but be jealous of everyone else living the life that he wanted to live. And so while he was busy back at home, saving the family firm, taking over for his dad, trying to help people of modest means live in comfortable homes, he came to realize that he was letting everyone else live their dreams, but his own were being squelched. So he decides he's going to kill himself. His life has been meaningless. It has not been anything that he thought it would be. And so he goes to the bridge in town and he plans to jump off of it when God intervenes and acts. He sends the goofiest angel that you could possibly imagine to chuckle his way through helping George. And what he does is he works with George to help see how different the world would be if it weren't for George Bailey. And so George Bailey goes back into a town that he never lived in. And what he sees there is depression everywhere, brokenness, poverty. His brother died in an accident that he wasn't there to save him for. His dad died and his mom becomes an old maid. The building and loan is purchased by Potter, who was wealthy and squelched it. And what ends up happening is people live in slums instead of nice houses. Over and over and over, the city is in the world that George had lived his whole life in is in much worse shape because George wasn't there to selflessly give his life to other people. And while he thought what he wanted more than anything was to go and live an adventure over there, he learns that his willingness to get up at every bell and help the people around him made for a wonderful life. And he had only interpreted everyone else living a wonderful life. In his mind, he had been sucked dry. But his giving away, he realized, had saved numerous people from otherwise terrible outcomes. His willingness to be present where he was planted made a difference for others. And so he comes to realize that not living his dreams was okay, that he was given a wonderful life, and just by showing up day after day and helping those around him, helped him understand how wonderful this life could be. And so at the very end of the movie, he realizes he's going to jail. His uncle had lost money. They were now in the hole. Money that was owed or reported to the government, it was missing, and he was going to go to jail. And so he comes back home filled with joy. He sees his family, loves them. He goes, "What a wonderful day, I'm going to jail," right? And the whole city that he had helped brought their savings back and piled it up in front of him to keep him from going to jail. And he realizes in the reciprocity of relationship that there's such joy and love. And so for the first time in his life, he didn't belong to his dreams, but he belonged to the people around him, his family, his community, his friends. And he realized that that belonging that had been there his entire life was more than any one man needed. And for the first time, he was filled with joy over what he had. I love that beautiful story. For me, I can remember the one moment that I felt like I belonged and how it was crucial and critical to my life. I've told you before that when I was in my early 20s, my dad died, and that right before he died, I left where I was and went to Kansas City in the middle of the country to go to seminary because I was sure that's what God wanted me to do with my life. And so I spent one semester away from my dying father. And during that semester, right before finals hit, my dad passed away. And I had to call all my professors and say, I can't be here for the last week of school. I've got to go to the funeral of my dad. And they all were very, very gracious. But I was gone in the last week of the semester, of my first semester, trying to arrange with professors and then go to a funeral home meeting, make a phone call to make sure that my group project was being done, and then spend time with family. And it was this back and forth strange week. And when I came back for the week of finals, my head was scrambled and it was all over the place. And I just wasn't sure what direction I was going. This is what tragedy does to you, right? And so I went to the mailbox on campus, and there was a piece of mail for me. You've heard of mail before, right? Usually a letter, handwritten. Anyways, there was a piece of mail there for me. I pulled it out and I opened it up, and it was a card written to me by the president of the seminary and the vice presidents and all of the staff and the faculty, all one by one. I was in my first semester there. I didn't know any of these people. They didn't know who I was. But they had all taken time to tell me that they cared for me and that they were there for me. And whatever was needed to help me thrive and succeed through that week of finals, they were going to move heaven and earth to help me out. And I couldn't believe it. And I closed that and I thought, who does this for people, right? They don't even know me. And I went and I finished all my finals, and I had it was okay. It was not great first semester. And I remember I went to Christmas break, and then I came back to start school again in January. And I remember my very first day of class that we had a bathroom break in the middle of it. And I got up and I was walking down the dingy hallway in the basement of the seminary. And I looked around and I remembered that card, and I saw people I knew a little bit now. It was kind of out of the fog of grief that comes. And I thought to myself, I still remember this feeling, I belong here. This is my place. And from there, I went on to graduate magna cum laude. I was a really good student. I invested in that place. I made lifelong friends. I began to thrive professionally in the pastorate. And that moment of someone coming to me, people I didn't know, in a time where I felt alone and in a fog of grief and overwhelmed with what was in front of me, and just a group of people taking time to say, you belong to us, made a tangible difference that has set me in the direction that I've spent the rest of my life. A simple act of saying, you belong to us, and we're going to take care of you, made all the difference for me. I want to be that kind of church. In a world where loneliness and not belonging is at an epidemic level that it's literally killing us, what difference can we at Crossroads make by looking at each other and reminding each other, you belong? And then in that belonging, going out to the world and telling people who are hurting, I know a place where you can belong. Our vision, which you see above my shoulder, is pretty simple. This part of it, and it's simple to say, but it's hard to execute, and I need your help. I need you to be the ligaments. I need you to be the bones. I need you to be the muscles, the movers and the shakers. I need you to help me with this because it's key to what we are going to be as a people. It says this, make it simple to belong to our church family. It's not going to be simple to belong to our church family if we're all a bunch of individuals coming and checking out when we leave. We've got to invest in this together and make it simple for people who are desperate for belonging to find that this community of faith is a place that they can belong. It might be the difference between their salvation and not. We're going to sing a final song about what we believe, and I hope this will be a rallying cry for us as we sing today. Because we don't belong to another social organization when we're at the church, right? This isn't another country club. This isn't another book club, right? This is a vibrant organism of God's life that we're a part of. And we gather and center around our belief that God sent his only son into the world that we would be saved, and we live as a transformed, saved people. And so we're going to sing this final song today, which is a creedal song. It's about what we believe. I believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm going to invite you to stand with me, and my hope is that you will sing out loud and proud as we sing this song. And as you sing, listen to the voices come around you in melody and in harmony with one another. And you can hear what beautiful things happen when the people of God come together and share life with one another and hear that we belong together and with each other for the sake of the mission that God has given us, to be a transformed people for the sake of this world. Sing and listen to your fellow churchgoers and rejoice that we are in this together.